Today I get to show Live 12. Everything I'm going to show you is from an alpha version, so anything you might see might change upon release. I think it's the perfect time to show the new MIDI roll features, which is a massive update compared to the old one. Some of these are familiar to FL users, so you'll see that there's these generate and transform drop downs now. I think I'm going to start with the generates. So now you can generate rhythms. I'm going to make a beat real quick. Get a random hi-hat sample. Then I'm going to set a pitch for my rhythm generator. Then I might shorten the step duration. Shift it over a little bit. That can be our first one. Then I'm going to duplicate this, get a different hi-hat, get a different pattern, and change it to a different rhythm. You also use this split knob to kind of double time in some parts. So then I might take this new hat and then pan it a little bit. Also shift it. Then of course, I'll duplicate it again, get a different hi-hat, pan it to the other side, and generate a new rhythm. I make this velocity vary more. You also change when the velocity is accented. And so we already have a pretty cool hi-hat pattern now. Might just finish the job with hybrid reverb, and then my cabinet selector. You can also generate other things, like a bunch of notes at a certain range, change the range of note length and velocity, and the max number of voices that all appear at once. And this density controls how much randomness actually shows up. I like to go to the pitch and time section and humanize the notes a little bit. I'll show more of the section in a second. There's also this shape generator, which is like kind of a sequencer in a way. You can control the rate, make some random variation, control the density of the randomness, which is a pretty cool way to make melodies actually. It's also some preset kind of shapes. And then there's this stacks generator, which is the chord generator. Instead of saying the name of the chord, which actually it does say the name of the chord at the bottom of the screen, it shows these like constellation kind of shapes. You choose the root note and you can choose the inversion. You can add another shape. And then you just keep on adding. And then you can offset the chords to start at different times. This obviously takes some tweaking. These are just really good idea starters, I think. And so there's also max for live generators, which you can use. Like, comes with this stock Euclidean. I think this opens up so many possibilities. Now, once you have one of these like random ideas generated, you can use something like the pitch and time. You extend to change the length of your entire MIDI clip. You can also add scale intervals to make easy chords. So say if I want to take these chords further, I can go to this transform drop down and arpeggiate the notes. Which works really similarly to the stock arpeggiator. There's also this connect feature, which kind of fills in the blank spaces between your chords. So if you turn up the spread, turn up the rate, turn up tie, and then lower the density, you might get some nice little flares. I want to spread it out a little bit more. There's also ornament, which kind of like adds these transient-ish kind of MIDI notes at the start. You can make them different pitches. Quantize is just your classic quantization that they've had. Recombine is kind of like a shuffle rotation thing, so there's actually a shuffle button or a mirror button, which I think is different from the reverse in pitch and time. And you can choose whether you want it to affect the pitch, length, velocity. And you got span, which is like a kind of length adjustment. It's kind of like humanizing, but for the ends. And I've waited so long for strum. I've been using ARP for this for the longest time before finding that one MIDI Sculptor Max device. And there's also this like time warp that's different than the pitch and time one, since you can kind of like make these different kind of curves. And of course you can quantize, fit within a certain time, fit in the original time frame. So I think a great order to perform these operations in is generate, then transform, then pitch in time. So I might add an octave interval. Glad my most requested feature has come to Ableton, which is an improved file browser, which has filters, custom tags, and a similar files button, which detects what the sound sounds like, and it can give you a bunch of other sounds that are in your library that sound kind of similar to it. So this is great for everyone that wants to be organized. I've spent many hours trying to sort all my drums and samples and whatnot, but they give you all these preset tags that you can start off with, or you can make your own tags. It's also cool because there's tags for key, groove, who made it, what kind of device it is. You can make your own groups too. You can also save search terms. So if I type in water, you can press this plus button and it will appear on the side right here. So you can just click on this and it'll automatically search for water. So there's a new stock synth called Meld, and the premise of it is that there's two synths in one, so you can make these like rich defined sounds right off the bat, but it also has some unique characteristics that none of the other synths in Ableton have, which I'll get to pretty soon. So they give you all these default synth engines. You can see these macros will change depending on the synth engine that you use. So for the swarm saw, you get like a motion one and a spacing knob, but if you choose something like noisy shapes, you get to control the shape and like the noisiness of it. And you'll see some of these synths have this flat sharp symbol, which means they can be a scale aware synth. So if you press this flat sharp button up here, which is called the scale awareness button, it will start to be scale aware. And you can set the scale of your track at the top here. See, I'm in G minor right now. You can change it to F minor or F anything. You also notice when you turn this button, the semitones transposition will change to scale degrees transposition. And that's something you can take full advantage of for making pretty sounds. Each of these synths have 3 of their own LFOs, or I guess 5 if you're counting the envelopes. But you get a lot of flexibility for customization. You can change shapes, fold your waves, and then you have a separate LFO which is based off the first LFO that you can also shape with all these different LFO effects. So now I'm going to open up this modulation matrix and start modulating stuff. I can also use the engine A LFOs to control anything in engine B. So I go to this cross modulation section. I can take the LFO1 effects and map it to the spacing of synth B. You also get a ton of these filters. So you got your classic morphing filter. So it's like low pass, band pass, high pass, notch. But they also give you all these unique ones too. They got this vowel one. You can morph the formant. They also got some scale aware filters like the resonators. But one of my favorites I've been playing with lately is phaser. You got this mix section over here, which you have these tone knobs for low pass, high pass. You got a built-in limiter, a drive knob. But my absolute favorite thing about this synth is the spread knob, which by default doesn't do anything. But when you turn on the stack to say like 3, there will be 3 separate instances of both of these synths. And in the modulation matrix, you can use the spread to modulate any of these parameters. So if I use this to modulate a filter frequency, the synths will be playing at 3 different filter frequencies. And this opens up for like a lot of spacious, rich synths that you probably never heard before. And you can also map this to the pitch quantization, which is scale aware. So you can be playing chords with 1 MIDI key. And you can see it was pretty simple to make a pretty synth without doing much. Next, I want to show the new audio effect in Live 12. It's called Roar. But basically, this is a multi-saturation distortion kind of device, which is the first audio effect, I think, that has its own expanded view in the same way that Wavetable and Meld do. I might put this on the Reese that we have going on right now. So you can choose these different routings, like you have your standard like 1 stage, or 1 stage going into another stage, or 2 stages processing at the same time, or multi-band, which I personally think Ableton should do more of, mid-side, and a feedback mode, which is affected by this feedback section over here. So parallel might be fun right now. So they got all these new different shapers for this. They also give you some new filters. Like, I don't think I've seen comb in Ableton before. And you've probably noticed that they give you 3 LFOs and an envelope follower that you can use to modulate stuff in the modulation matrix. Get a cool shaper in here too to make non-standard LFO shapes. Might use this to map the drive. This noise one is also pretty interesting because it's basically just kind of introducing some randomness into the mix. So I can probably do that into like the blend amount. For the second stage, I might do something like fractal. It's a really goopy stage. Maybe I can high pass this one. This feedback mode is really interesting. So you can do it by these time and synced modes, or you can have it resonate to a certain note. Might do it to F to see how that might sound. This might work well if you turn down the tone. So I think I'm going to have this noise help with the feedback. And just to give something envelope follower to do, I might play with the threshold, extend the release maybe, change the detection frequency. Ultimately, I think you can think of roar as bass bus as drum bus is to drum bus. They also made some new changes to all modulation devices. Say I map this to this filter frequency. You can now have the option to automate these knobs while they're being modulated, or have multiple modulations at once. And even change the polarity, or you can go back to the way it was before with this remote feature. Now, if you remember the microtuner device, they've expanded on that concept by introducing this tuning pool above the groove pool, so you can start making tracks that are not in 12 TET, I think that's what it's called, and this affects all of like the MIDI tunings. You can also change your reference pitches too, so you can finally align your chakras or whatever with 432. And I'm glad that it's easier to make half key songs too. A minor but cool feature is that you can now freeze and flatten compared to just freeze. So now I want to show Granulator 3, which is now MPE capable. I'm going to drag in this little melody we made. So Granulator 3 has these new grain modes and even the ability to reverse. There's also this cloud mode, which plays like all these different grains at once. And my personal favorite thing to do with this is go to the LFO, make it random mode, turn down the rate a little bit, turn up the stereo so it's different for the left and right channel, turn up the variation all the way, LFO all the way. This is already raw. I definitely feel like I'm forgetting some features. Last thing I can think of is that Ableton added new themes, which I think is exciting because that means we're probably going to get more themes in the future. This is supposed to be the default theme. You can make it follow whether your system is in light mode or dark mode, and you can have all these different cool, warm, neutral tones. This is a pretty cool looking theme. This one, I like applying hues to this one. Classic dark, classic medium light. This one is kind of cool. This one's just kind of a little easier on the eyes. That is all, I think. I'm curious, what do you want to see in Live 12.1 or Live 13 even? I personally hope that you can freeze and flatten groups because you can't do that right now. More content in the future.